Trump now organizing key allies in an effort to counter this week's big reveal by the January 6th committee. A series of committee hearings begins in primetime Thursday night, and those involved promise new evidence, new testimony, and new context of how Trump's plot to steal the 2020 election unfolded, including the violence at the Capitol. Some new CNN reporting, though, reveals how Trump and his allies are planning to hit back. Our reporters are back with us. You're part of this reporting. The former president knows this is not going to be good for him. And so who is he trying to get to help him and how?
Well, he has reached out to several allies on Capitol Hill, including Kevin McCarthy, the GOP leader. He, of course, was also subpoenaed by the committee, so there could be damaging information about him as well. He's also under pressure to show support after he got caught on tape criticizing Trump in the immediate wake of January 6th. And then Elise Stefanik. She's the conference chair. She's in charge of messaging. She is a self-proclaimed ultra MAGA Republican. Actually, she'll be having a fundraiser with him later today up in New York, so I'm sure the strategy will come into focus. But we should point out that most Republicans that we talk to on Capitol Hill don't want to give any attention to the Select Committee hearings. They would rather ignore it, pivot to other issues. And also, there's only so much spin you could put on something when they're going to have cold, hard evidence in the form of text messages and documents and firsthand witnesses. And so this counterattack that is being launched, it's mostly being done for an audience of one, and that's Donald Trump.
Donald Trump and the Trumpy conservative silo. I don't even want to call it conservative anymore, the Trumpy media silo there. So the question is, can the committee meet its test? It says it will have all this new evidence, new testimony. A lot of the depositions were videotaped. We may see Ivanka Trump, for example. We may see Donald Trump Jr., for example, talking about what was going on that day there. Listen to Liz Cheney. She is not with the Republican leadership. She, of course, and Congressman Kinzinger, the two Republicans who agreed to serve on the committee. She says America needs to tune in with an open mind.
We are not in a situation where former President Trump has expressed any sense of remorse about what happened. We are, in fact, in a situation where he continues to use even more extreme language, frankly, than the language that caused the attack. And so people must pay attention. People must watch, and they must understand how easily our democratic system can unravel if we don't defend it.
So here's a test as she makes that point. And it's an important point, take all the names out of it. It's an important point for what happened on that day. It's also an important point, though, for the Trump legacy, including whether he runs again in 2024. And if you look at the polling, this is an NBC News poll, is Trump solely or mainly responsible? Now, 45% of Americans say that, right? Immediately after, it was 52%. Somewhat not really responsible, 55%, 47%. So the numbers are trending in Trump's favor, if you will. People have a less damning impression now. It's still bad, but it's less damning now. What part of the committee's challenge, in their view, is to change that again.
Yeah, it is shock and awe, right? It is prime time. It is compelling text. It is compelling video. It is all of this stuff that is, by and large, meant to influence American opinion. And, some of that is political. Some of that very much relates to how we're going to view Trump in perpetuity, but they're competing for eyeballs against all of these domestic issues and trying to bring this issue right to the fore.
And so the question is part of the times we live in. The two most famous names in journalism, Woodward and Bernstein, it's 50 years since Watergate, wrote a piece in the Washington Post this weekend in which they say both Nixon and Trump created a conspiratorial world in which the U.S. Constitution, laws, and fragile democratic traditions were to be manipulated or ignored. Political opponents in the media were enemies, and there were few or no restraints on the powers entrusted to presidents. In today's age, can you capture the country's attention like you could in the Watergate hearings when you had the network news? I remember I was 10 years old, sitting next to my dad watching the Watergate hearings. Our media is fractured now. Everyone has a lot of people live in their self-segregated media silos. Can you capture the nation's attention?
It'll be hard. It just will, because you also have all of this counter programming that will be directly undermining what's happening right there on the television screen. I mean, not only is Trump himself trying to discredit the committee and trying to discredit it through his allies on the Hill, he's endorsed candidates in various states who will be on the ballot, some of them in the midterms already, who are doing that work as well and who are continuing to spread disinformation about the 2020 election. So, Watergate, we didn't have that in the same megaphone as you do now.
The committee, Congresswoman Cheney clearly understands that. But again, she gets caught up in it. A lot of Republicans say, well, she just wants to run against Trump, or she has a primary later this year with a Trump-backed challenger. How do they deal with the politics, which are inescapable, and the history, which is critical?
They are absolutely cognizant of that challenge. First of all, that's why they're thinking about it in terms of how to make a splash, right? They're holding these hearings in prime time. They even brought in a network executive to help choreograph how the hearings are going to go down. So they are thinking about how to break through. And the other component of this is the witnesses that they're going to bring in. And they're trying to bring in people who are conservatives, people from Pence world, people that could maybe break through to that remaining pocket if there is any segment of the population left who isn't convinced that this was something that Trump and his allies coordinated and did.
And you mentioned most Republicans would, prefer to be like in another country or at least, away from this because they understand. Most of them privately understand what happened. That they don't have the courage to talk publicly is for you to decide at home whether you're a private. Listen to Tom Rice. Tom Rice is one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump. So forgive and forget.
There's no way you could support him for president again.
No. There's one way.
Yeah.
If he apologized.
So if he came out and said, I'm sorry, I mean, all
If
that
he
goes
came out
on.
and said, I'm sorry that I made a huge mistake on January 6th, then I might consider it.
What will it mean for the Republican Party if he runs again?
I think it will hurt us.
There are two interesting pieces of that. Number one, saying candidly it will hurt us if Trump runs again, in his view. This is South Carolina. That's an important state for Republicans. But then the idea that, Trump apologized. Hold your breath.
You may as well just go with no.
Yeah. Well, Tom Rice is also in a primary next week. He's going up against a conservative Trump-backed challenger, so he's like leaving that little door open. But Tom Rice knows Trump is never going to apologize.